Go. Hello, everyone, and and welcome to another Tree Stuff webinar. Let me get my Tree Stuff shirt in the view there. I am Cale Royer. I am not Nick Araya. He will be out here in a second. He had to go grab his coconut water and get ready. I just want to let everybody know about a couple things that are going on right now. We have the Petzl20 coupon code if you're a fan of Petzl. You can buy all the Petzl stuff at 20% off now. So I would suggest doing that. If you are anywhere in the United States, go to our Facebook page and the events page or treestuff.com/parties because I have parties set up in your area, probably, maybe. The next one is next weekend, February 18th. That is in Cheyenne, Wyoming, hosted by Nina Wodrowski. So if you are anywhere in the area, head out there. It's going to be a lot of fun. We send out a lot of gear for people to try out. I've got some Tree Stuff banners sent out there, so like whether she's going to use them as competition prizes or give them away, who knows what's going to happen. But that part is up to her. It's always a lot of fun. If you've been to one before, you know that it's pretty. It's always free, so there's no reason not to go if you're in the area. For CEUs, we are going to have a quiz that we're going to be getting set up at the end of the broadcast. Not podcast. We're not starting a podcast yet, as far as I know. I'm sure Nick Bonner will come to me and tell me that I have to start a podcast. But stick around. There will be a link posted for the quiz, and then in maybe a week or two after we've gotten a lot of responses for that, we'll be sending those into the ISA and they'll be putting it all together. It does take some time, so please allow like 2 months, up to 2 months for it to actually show in your account. If you have any problems with that, email us media@treestuff.com. Sometimes we just need to send proof that you actually took the quiz again to them, and they'll get things sorted out. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to your host, Nick Araya. And
hello, everybody. All right, I guess this is it. Cale, I think we're good. I'm going to assume you have good audio over here. Awesome. All right, well, today we're going to talk about how we run our company in regards to the foreman, who's in charge around here, who's running this show, and how are decisions made. This came from a presentation that two of our other guys did for the Western chapter, and the Western chapter asked us to present on just general, like, cool things that we do at TreeCareLA. And this concept was one slide in their presentation, and everybody, like, all the hands went up for questions, and I started getting a bunch of questions. I was out of state when they were doing their presentation, and my phone was blowing up. And that's what sort of gave me the idea, hey, we could take that one slide and turn it into a whole presentation. So that is where we are today. And I have a sneaking suspicion we're not going to have a ton of people on this one, but that the people that are watching are going to be really excited about the topic, because there's a billion YouTube videos on all the latest climbing gear and climbing techniques, but not a lot of YouTube videos on how to actually run your company when it's a tree company. So yeah, I think that's it. Should we go right into it? All right. So there's a cute little picture of our company and our crew, I should say, the office, myself, my wife, and everything. Let me start by telling you a little bit about our company. I know that a lot of people really follow us on social media, and you guys know more than I would care to admit about my company. But for anyone that's new following along, we mostly do residential. We do have a few commercial clients, but 95% are residential properties. I used to refer to us as a small company, but as far as tree companies go nationwide, we're not small anymore. We're medium size. We've got more. I think a small company, really a small tree company, is like 1 to 5 people, and that now we're entering into this realm of like talking about dozens of people. But we're a stacked company as far as certifications go. Out of the 17 of us, there are 9 certified arborists. I'm a board certified master arborist. We've got a few people with the track certification. That's a lot. If you look, at least in Southern California, the companies that I know of that have 9 certified arborists, they have 100 employees. They're big, giant, mega companies, or it's the utility company or something like that. So this is part of the secret recipe that allows the No-Foreman model to work. So I'm not just doing this to brag, like, ooh, look at my company. It's part of the formula. And I think that if you might want to experiment with this model, you're going to have to start thinking about that part of things. Most of the work we do, most of our revenue comes from pruning and removals as well. And then a small percentage of it comes from all the other things: consulting, cabling, putting up props, and trunk injections, and other air spade work, things like that. So let's start right now, and this will be more for you to look at later. If you hit the like button, there's going to be 3 options here. I want to see who's watching this thing, and just hit the like button a whole bunch of times. If you are a business owner watching this thing, we'll let that go for a couple seconds. And I can actually open up Facebook on my iPad over here so I can follow along with the likes. And then if you are an employee of a company and you're watching so that you can tell your boss how to run their company, smash that like button a bunch of times. How come people say smash the like button? And then if you're not just an employee, but you're some sort of a manager in the company, maybe a foreman or something like that, a crew leader, hit the like button a bunch of times. And let's see. Sorry, I spilled my coconut water. That's why I'm looking down, trying to clean that up. Okay. All right. So we might tap into that information later on. What is a foreman? I want to just talk about that real quick to make sure that my understanding of what a foreman is, we want to clarify that language. So I'm going to call it a normal company. And the reason why I'm going to say that a company with a foreman is a normal company is because I think almost any company I walk into right now, if I'm checking them out, they can point to who the foreman is. And it may be a very small company. Let's assume it's 4 people. The owner, who's the climber, and they're on every job site, that's the foreman. Eventually, if the company grows, it will get to a point where the owner can't always be on the job site because they typically become a salesperson. And then their number 2 becomes the job site number 1. And that's a standard model that we see repeated in every profession. All of the trades have that. I've seen documentation references in OSHA documentation that it's a requirement to have a foreman to enforce safety policies and things like that. This is weird. I'm going to pause. I have to sprint over there and get another paper towel because I didn't clean it up good enough. So just wait like 5 seconds. Okay. All right. So that's the standard model of running a tree company. And I think this could apply to painters and plumbers and electricians and anything like that. I got it now. Oh, I thought that's why you're coming out here. never mind. Okay, so there's the boss, typically the owner of the company, typically with the sales team underneath them that are writing the work orders. And then you have the foreman, the people in blue that are running the crew that's doing the work. And then I think in my experience, I started doing tree work in 2001. And I've worked at 8 companies or so. And I think half of them had what I would call an observing foreman, and the other half had a working foreman that was, usually the top climber that was doing most of the decision making, the communication with the client, and all that kind of stuff. And that's who's doing the tree. The crew is doing the actual cutting of the trees. So that's the standard model. What is that foreman doing? Really, they are the boss's goal of being there when they can't be there. They're filling that gap. And I think if we look at all of the tree companies, all of the small size tree companies, they typically start with an arborist, a tree worker, someone who's good at cutting trees down or working on trees or wants to save all the trees. And not always, Kale, it's really choppy. Just text me if I need to do something different or if you need to jump in. That might just be how it looks on my side. I think as long as the audio is coming through clear. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So the foreman is the boss's right hand. They are there to keep the company making money. There's this concept that when the boss is away, when the cat is away, the mouse will play. And so that's the boss's cat that keeps the mice in line. And when something goes wrong, the boss doesn't need to go down to the new ground guy and ask them why that thing broke. He can talk to the foreman directly. They're there to make sure nobody gets hurt and to make sure everyone knows what to do and get things done. And that's a very effective model. That's why the military uses it. That's why every tree company I've ever worked at had a pretty clear foreman on every job. I believe that every tree worker gets it. If you start working at a company and they're using that model, which is basically every company, you don't have to guess who your boss is. You can tell it's that one particular dude that's bossing everyone around. It's straightforward. People understand it. It helps the communication out because there are easy questions that the new employee doesn't have to go bother the owner of the company with. They can bother the people at their level, and if those guys don't know the answer, they can take it up to the foreman right there, and not bother the boss, which is another way of saying there's a clear power dynamic. It's good for new guys, all the new people, and by guys I mean you guys, you boys, and you girls. It's easy for them to like fit in and see where their place is and know what they're supposed to do. If a foreman says, hey, you get all the cones out. When we pull up to the job site, don't worry about the trees, just get all the cones out and get all the tools ready. This is one that like at first you're like, why is that a good thing? I believe that most people, and maybe it's tree workers specifically, don't really want to talk to the client. They are working on trees because trees don't ask questions, and it's very clear and concise. I've noticed, I've never had a problem talking with clients, even when I didn't know what I was talking about. But I've noticed over time that more and more new employees would rather not ever have to talk to the client. And when you have a foreman, that's their job. When we pull up, there's people that are putting the cones out. There are people that are filling the chainsaws. And the foreman is the one that walks up and knocks on the door, says hi to the client, and makes sure the car gets moved out of the driveway and all that kind of stuff. You see it everywhere. It's not just a tree industry thing. And I decided to leave that slide in there. All right, now that all works if the foreman is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and if the foreman is moderately respected by the people below them, and if the foreman cares about their job. But what if the foreman sucks? And I've worked at companies where the foreman was really, really bad, and within a few days, I could tell that that foreman was dangerous because they didn't care. I could see situations where the foreman is playing favorites. And even though I was better at a certain task, they would put the other climber in the tree. And not because that's how to get the job done the fastest, but because those two hang out on the weekends, and you could see that favoritism getting played. This is something that that I've noticed as soon as I entered into the workforce, and hated it right away. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It was just something that for me, I didn't like. And that's information guarding. We can pull up to a job site and the foreman says, all right, Nick, I want you to go do the box elder in the back. And I have no idea what else we're doing. And maybe I don't need to know that, but I felt like I didn't want to know that. I did feel like I need to know that. And, but the work order was on a clipboard, and the foreman is walking around and he's the only one with the clipboard looking at it, saying who's doing what. Part of it, I think, was a morale thing for me, because I would go finish the box elder and then say, what next? And then he'd say, okay, go deadwood that that spruce tree over there. And sometimes I would ask questions like, how much is left? Because frankly, I want to go home. And I'd love to know how many things are left. And I think a good foreman will paint the picture for everybody, so we know if today's going to be a quick day or a hard day. So that's a personal preference on my behalf, but it's just something that I didn't like. And I think bad foremans hold individuals back, and bad foremans hold the whole crew back, and in turn that holds the whole company back. So what if we just don't have a foreman and you have total chaos? There was a moment where I realized I didn't like how certain companies ran things, and that my best maneuver in life was to start my own company. And so at the very beginning, I was the only worker at my company. It was just me handling all the calls, making the website, and doing the actual work. And so I was the foreman, and I was the one that met the client and sold the job and booked the job and showed up to do the job. And when they had a complaint, the client would come to me. That's very easy. When I hired my first employee, I was the foreman, because that person was new to the company, and not new to trees, but new to the industry of tree work. So for the first few years of my company, I never thought about what's the leader, the decision-making model in my company. I didn't think about who the foreman was, because everybody knew that it was me. And if you could go back and look at the evolution of my company, there was a moment where it was me and 3 or 4 other tree workers, and I realized that I was now holding us back because I could only sell a certain amount of jobs per week, especially if I was also the crew leader on the job, and the lead climber on the job. So I observed this in my father owns a home restoration company. They do like flood and fire damage and stuff like that. And I noticed that there was a moment when I worked at his company that he wanted to go to every single job site and really tell us down to the detail what needed to be done. And it's what a lot of us would call micromanaging. And I saw that there was that limitation because there were moments where we could book more work, but he knew he wouldn't be able to get to it. So he would postpone that work, even though we could get more employees and just do more volume. And so when my company was at a point where I was the one holding us back, it was around year 3 or 4. That's when I said, oh my gosh, I need to step away off the crew. And what we started doing was scheduling jobs so that 1 or 2 days a week, I would go and do a half a day and then get the hardest things done and then leave the crew to finish for the second half of the day while I would go do consultations. And that was the very beginning of me stepping off the crew. And I think it took another 2 or 3 years until I wasn't on the job site anymore at all. And it was in that 2 or 3 years where we realized that TreeCareLA was going to be a No-Foreman company. And the way the transition started was when it was just me and about 3 or 4 guys, I was approached by a climber that wanted to move to LA and he wanted to work at TreeCareLA. And his name's Tommy Masters. He works at Heartwood on the other side of the country in North Carolina. Some of you may know him. He's now a board certified master arborist, highly respected and hugely responsible for the growth of my company because he was the first person I worked with at this company where I realized they were way better than me. And I have worked at a lot of backwoods companies, I think is a polite way to say it, where even as a young climber, I knew that these guys have more experience than me, but I have more knowledge than them. And I moved really high up the ranks in those companies. And to be clear, I did work at Mark Chisholm's company, and I'm not counting him as one of the backwoods companies. When Tommy started at our company, I realized, holy crap, this guy's way better than me, way, way, way better than me. I do not need to be here at all. And within a few months of him working here, I transitioned from going to every job site every single morning with the crew, doing the walkthrough with them, maybe taking Tommy and going to the nearby afternoon job and doing a walk through there for 10 minutes and then coming back to the job site, dropping him off, and then the crew would do the work. And at that moment, Tommy's skill level and his almost instinctual understanding of how a job site should be run made him the foreman. I never called him the foreman. He never declared himself to be the foreman, but everybody knew that he was the foreman and he did an amazing job at it. But there was a point where our company grew beyond having Tommy able to be at all the difficult jobs. And we started hiring more climbers and sending the crew out so that there were 2 simultaneous crews. Now, all of a sudden, who's in charge of crew number 2? And I never said or acted like it was any one specific person. And this was the beginning. I think Tommy was here at our company for about 2 or 3 years. And when he left, we continued on without that foreman person. And everyone here was adult enough to know the picture, like get the picture enough to know what needed to be done. And I think at the beginning it was beginning mimicking the patterns that they had started with Tommy as the foreman. And then as the crew developed and changed, they would modify that pattern. So really, what does it mean to not have a foreman? You have to have the trained crew, and those are the people that are going to take the lead because they know what to do. You can have a tree worker that's really good at working the tree, but not understand all the other facets to working the job site. And what are those things? It's the ordering of the line items of one debate that's fun to listen to is, do we start in the front yard and work our way to the back, or vice versa? And I know everyone here, you can put it in the comments. I have a feeling what most people are going to say, but sometimes I hear people say something opposite of what I would expect. And sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. But if you've never had to be in a position to think about it, it could be chaos, but the crew has to know what to do. And that's why we have all these certified arborists and people that can kind of match up the work order to the tree itself and to understand what needs to be done. So sorry, that was a little clerical error right there. So if you don't have a foreman, it takes out the micromanaging. And what I mean by that, oh, you know what I just remembered? I need to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, because Robert Albritton will guaranteed try to call me during this presentation. So now I got him on Do Not Disturb. Nice try, Robert. Okay. If I send a crew out to do a job and nobody knows what they're doing, I need to swing by the job multiple times through the day. I need to constantly text the foreman, if there is one, or all of them, and just say like, hey, did you forget about the pool cover? Did you make sure to move those plants over there? Because I can't be there to make sure it gets done. And so, but I got to make sure that it gets done. But I can't be doing that. I don't have the time for that. And I'm assuming if you have a company that's big enough that you can walk away from the job site even one day a week, that that you're too busy to be doing that. So I have to be able to trust my team. I have to trust that they know to lay a piece of plywood over the jacuzzi cover so we don't puncture it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And I have to trust that when they pull up to the job site, they're going to get out, knock on the door, and say hi to the client and speak nice to them. I believe this is just a belief thing, and then I'm going to carry through the mentality, kind of the mindset of it. I believe that it increases the morale of the team for a lot of reasons, and better morale equals better employee retention, which equals better productivity, which equals better profitability. That's the gist, that line. Morale equals longevity equals productivity, which equals profit. It makes people be together better. This is a fun picture. They're all smiling and they look like friends, but the very next day they might be yelling at each other, telling them to shut up. But the reality is that can happen with any kind of leadership model. If you come to our company and observe what we do, it does feel like really kumbaya. And that isn't a coincidence. It's something that we have assembled intentionally. I believe that it creates less cutthroat competition. When I started out as a ground guy and an aspiring climber, I knew in my head I could see the rank of who in my company I needed to get better at next. And I pushed really aggressively, and it did make me a better climber. But that was the only option. They did have good training opportunities at where I started working at the Care of Trees. It was a great company, but it was also competitive in the sense of I wanted to be better, and I ended up ranking everybody. So we have a supportive environment here where I didn't always feel at the companies that I worked at that I could walk up to a guy and be like, "Hey, Mike, I think I want to I want to try to do a removal. Could I do that?" Because he'd be like, "No way, dude! I do all the removals. You can do the deadwooding of the maple trees." And in order for the No-Foreman model to work, you can't have that mentality, because the goal is to bring everybody up. The goal is to divide the crew so that instead of having one top climber, it's almost like you have 2 or 3 or 4 top climbers, and that it just keeps on multiplying. It takes out bureaucracy. We try to avoid having a lot of paperwork to fill out. I know that my crew, any of them can text me, obviously. I'm sure it's like this at every company, even if you do or don't have a foreman, that they can just text the boss directly. But the types of questions that I get, I feel like they're really good questions when I get them. It's typically not like, "Hey, on this branch over the house, are we bringing it back to the left leader or to the right leader? Like, I'm not sure which one I should do here." It's like a higher level of questions that I get. And usually the question is coming after a conversation has been had on the job site. When I'm not there, things can happen and the crew can handle it. Something gets broken, or maybe some specs were unclear on the tree, so they had to work on the fly. And the crew has to be able to handle it. That's the expectation, that acknowledging that I'm not perfect in what I do, and you as my employee are there to help me fill in the gaps when I make mistakes. So this is called a flat hierarchy. If you think of that pyramid I showed you at the beginning, where you have the owner at the top, and then the salespeople, the foreman, and then the crew underneath, and it's typically depicted as a pyramid because there's one owner and then multiple people on the crew, 1 or 2 salespeople, or 3 or 4. But the more salespeople you have, the more crew members you have. It's a hierarchy. And we have that here. We have Karina and I are the owner. I do a lot of the sales. I do most of the sales. And then we have 2 other salespeople. So that's 3 salespeople. And then we have the production crew, which there are about a dozen of them. And so we have that hierarchy, that pyramid, but the way it's all treated is referred to as flat. And I never knew that. That's something that when we were doing research for this presentation, Karina found articles referencing a flat hierarchy. And I'm not the kind of guy that reads leadership books or how to run a company books. And I probably should, because I own a company. And so it was really neat to find out this phrase, because it perfectly describes what it is. And it isn't, well, we'll leave it at that. We'll get to the next point I was about to make. So each person on the crew, they go into it knowing their role. And then when there's deviations from the expectation, deviations from their expected tasks, usually leads to a little bit of a conversation. And a conversation could be like, hey, what are you doing? That's my tree, because that climber is always the person that does the Mexican fan palms, and a new person is trying to go up the Mexican fan palm. And, so there can be a conversation about it. And it's not always, I'm painting little to no middle management between employees and the executives. And that's exactly what we have here. I still go to job sites, not every day, not every job site. But it is more flatlined. We found that it is highly revered in certain industries. I once had a chat with one of our clients, a retired gentleman who was a consultant, and he would go into aerospace manufacturing companies, and the biggest thing that he did would transition them into a flat organizational structure. And I think I talked to him for about 3 hours because he invited me. He's like, hey, I want you to come look at my trees. The job is great. Your crew is awesome. I have some questions for you. I thought he was complaining about the work that we did. And I showed up to his house, and he said, who's the foreman? The guys were gone, and the job was finished days prior. And I told him, like, almost embarrassed, like, we don't really have one. And I thought he was going to criticize me. And that's when he introduced himself and described more, what his profession is. And it was neat to have that conversation with someone who's done this on a mega scale. And he told me specific major companies that are world renowned that run manufacturing plants off of a flat organizational structure. And so if a whole entire aerospace manufacturing plant can be run as a flat organizational structure, there's no reason why a tree company, with a dozen employees can't. Here's some articles. I'm not going to go into them, but if you want to look these up later, you can read about them. And it really summarizes a lot of the things that we're talking about here in a way that reminded me that I should read more books about business management. So, all right, so let's talk about what this actually means, more detailed. Let's get into the nitty gritty. Kale, are there any questions yet right now? Should we take a quick break or keep rolling ahead? I hear you loud and clear.
Hi, yes, I do have a couple questions here. I'm going to get you started on them and then mute myself because my toddler broke into my office and is running around talking. So I think the first one we've got in here is from Robert Sheffy on YouTube. He's asking who is responsible for keeping the guys safe. We all had safety training at the companies I worked for, so who is the safety trainer?
Okay, very good. And should I answer that one now, or is there another one?
If you're gonna answer that,
I am actually going to talk specifically about that in some future slides.
Fantastic. Then we will let that go for a little bit. Who takes ownership of quality control is another one. And another one is, it's not really a question, but he's just mentioning companies that require Class A licenses would be tough to envision this working. So if you'd like to talk about that now or keep that as something to talk about later, that's up to you.
I think that we will save that one for the very end. I'm writing it on my list right here. And whoever asked that question, if you're still watching, if you could put in the comments, and Kale will share it with me later, why would that be difficult? And I think I know what the answer is, but before I comment on it, I just want to know why you think the Class A would make it a challenge. Okay. That's it for. Okay, cool. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of the No-Foreman model, the flat hierarchy of TreeCareLA. First of all, we got to talk about the downside. I think there are a lot of people that follow us on Instagram and they have a vision of what TreeCareLA is. And I know for a fact, because I get comments on it, people on my crew get comments from people around the world. And the expectation of what's going on here at TreeCareLA, the vision that everyone else has is a lot more awesome than it really is. Just like any company, we have hurdles here. We have problems we have to overcome. We have safety issues that need to be constantly managed. And I believe you're going to have that. That's a people problem that can't be fixed by an organizational model. So let's get into what those hurdles are. If everything isn't, if everyone isn't doing their job the right way, you have an increased potential for a go back. And I think everyone knows what that phrase is, but in case you call it something else where you're from, if you leave a chainsaw in somebody's yard, someone has to go back to get it. If you forget to do a line item, maybe there's 20 trees that are getting pruned and you did all the big giant scary ones, but you forgot to do the little apple tree that the boss put on the quote for free, but now the client's mad because you didn't do that one thing that was on the quote. Someone has to go back to do it. There's a variety of other go backs. If the client just has questions on something, then the boss has to go back to talk to the client. So there could be more go backs. If people aren't level-headed and able to properly communicate, there can be a disagreement about who's doing what. And just think of it simply like dragging brush. This hillside sucks. I want to be the climber. You drag the brush. No, you're not in charge. I'm the climber. You're drag. I dragged yesterday. You got to drag brush today. And that's all part of the lack of clarity in the chain of command. You won't have that when there's a foreman who says, I don't care if you dragged brush yesterday, you're doing it again today. Go grab a rake, like that. The foreman can expedite that process. And then for new employees, it can be, they can feel a little lost at first because there's no one telling them what to do. Nobody's saying, hey, when we get to the job site, you make sure to put those cones out. There are other hurdles, but they're all, you can see that they're all coming from like basically confusion. And that's the foreman's job, is to avoid confusion by all parties, the boss, the salespeople, the client, and the crew when the job is happening. So how do we do that? One, we have meetings every Monday. We go over incident reports. If things happened the week prior where maybe something got broken or an injury almost happened, we give a quick synopsis of what's going to be happening in the upcoming week, especially if there's any big jobs that the crew needs to mentally get ready for. When we interview, I don't interview people. It's typically done as a team. We used to do it with everybody. And it got a little cumbersome when we had 10 people in one interview, and now we'll have a small team of people, maybe me and Karina and 4 people from the crew. That's usually who would do it, which is still a lot of people. But in order for this concept to work, the people that we bring in, don't just need the right skills. They need to mesh with our overall team. They have to feather in really well. And so someone in their interview might be asking questions about, do you prefer still or Husqvarna? But really what they're doing is trying to see how you respond, not what you respond with, but what's your body language? Do you know how to smile? Stuff like that. Are you a person that I want to hang out with for 8 to 12 hours a day for the next few years of my life or more? So safety, that photo is from the peak COVID times, in case you're wondering what's with all the masks. Just like anything else, and I know that somebody had asked a question about this. Safety isn't somebody's job. When there's a foreman, if the boss pulls up to the job site and someone's running around with no safety glasses on, it's very easy to go to the foreman and say, hey, where is this person's safety glasses? And the foreman's like, oh, yeah. Let me go get them. But the way we look at it is safety is not a person's job. It's everybody's job. And I believe that if you took gave a safety rating to all the companies across the country and, ranked them on how many people are wearing glasses, earplugs, and all that kind of stuff, how many people are one-handing chainsaws when they shouldn't be, and gave everybody a score. My hypothesis is that the No-Foreman models, if they're being done properly, they have a better safety rating than a standard foreman model. But at a minimum, the lack of a foreman can't make it worse. So we have to have safety trainings. We do it all the time. We do the 15-minute tailgate meetings that the TCIA offers. We do those every single week. We're really good at it now. There was a time when we were only doing about 3 of those per year. And then we started tracking them on a spreadsheet. And now we do approximately 50 of those per year. So that's, obviously the base level of what should be done. And then we have other training days. It might be taking the whole crew to a program like Treetopia last, I think that was August when we all went to Treetopia, and we took the whole crew there. That's a massive investment for me as the owner to stop production for a couple of days, travel everybody up to where the event is being held, and then pay for the event, the food, and pay the employees. That's a huge investment. But as much as it pains me to do it, I knew it was something that is only going to be better for the company, not in the long run, years from now, but immediately. People are putting things out in the field the week after they come back from Treetopia. So I have to diligently provide safety equipment to people. I've worked at places where you were told to wear earplugs, but there were no earplugs. And the expectation was that earplugs are cheap, go buy whatever ones you like and then use them, which is exactly what I did. And there's a constant conversation being had here that never ends. Actually, earplugs are a bad example because A, most of our crew wears ear muffs on their helmets, and B, we have one particular type of earplug that no one has ever complained about. So, but other than that, safety glasses, we're always trying new safety glasses. Gloves, I'm always talking to the crew about what kind of gloves do you want? Do we stick with the blue rubber gloves, the Smurf gloves that everybody uses? Sometimes there'll be one person that wants a particular kind of glove, and then I will offer to them, like, can you buy them yourself on the company card if they're not too expensive? Or do we have our office have the blue gloves for everyone, and then they're getting that one particular person the kind that he wants. Because I know that if you have safety equipment that you prefer, you're more likely to use it. So you have to put a lot of energy and effort into making people want to do the safety things. I could go on and on and on and on and on about this part of our profession, but I think we all get it. So to answer it, who is in charge is everybody when it comes to safety. If I notice one person that won't wear their safety glasses, then I have to talk to that person. But if I notice it as a group of people, then we're talking to everybody about it, maybe at the Monday morning meeting, or maybe in the morning while they're getting the trucks ready. I'll pull everybody together and say, hey, there's these things that I'm noticing that you're doing, and we need to fix it. So in order, you heard my complaints about the foreman that hides the information. I go to the opposite end. Everybody at our company has access to Jobber. Jobber is an app that lets people make quotes, and the clients approve them, and then that becomes the work order, and that's our script. We work in Hollywood, so we use that language. That's the script that the client is expecting us to carry out. And we want everyone, the brand new employees, the very first day they show up to begin working here, after they do their onboarding paperwork with HR, somebody says, all right, here's how to get into Jobber. Here's the password. Here's how to see what the address to the property is. Here's how to see how much TreeCareLA is charging the client for that line item. And we want them to know that day one. We allow them to see that ahead of time. They can see every job that's on the schedule. If we're booked 6 weeks out, they can go see what we're doing 6 weeks from now. And some of the dudes on our crew will ask questions in the Monday morning meeting, like, hey, in a month we're doing this particular tree. Can I be scheduled on a different job because they don't want to work on that job? Or vice versa, can I be one of the climbers on that job? We let them see how much the company's making on that job, what the prices are, and we let them see when things are working really well and the company is succeeding. We show them that, and the same if the company isn't doing well. Hey, Kel, how are we doing on time here? I can't remember when we're supposed to stop. Yeah. Yes, I understand. So I don't think we have a full hour left, but maybe there will be a lot of questions and questions there at the end. Anyways, we'll keep going. So we have to be an open book. There are some secrets here, but not very many, and definitely way less than at any other company I've ever worked at. And that's one of the secrets to the whole formula here. If the new employees can instantly see everything that has to happen, whether they understand it or not, it's starting to formulate their understanding of the big picture of what we do here. So in Jobber, in the work orders that we write, there are a lot of little like secret codes on the specs that I've worked at places where the work order said backyard silver maple trim tree, $350. And I have to interpret, what does that even mean? And my options are to talk to the client, call the boss, or assume. And if I call the boss, he's like, oh my God, why are you bothering me with this? Just trim the freaking tree, like figure it out. If I ask the client, they're going to ask for everything. That list goes on and on if you leave it up to the client. So we resolve that by having really good details outlining what we're doing. Here's an example. Once a quarter, we have a presentation to the whole entire company. It might be boring to some people, but we show them what our quarterly revenue is, how many jobs we've done, how many Yelp reviews we got, the profit and loss for the quarter. What else do we show? Oh, how many go backs we did. We show the number of go backs, and we assign a responsibility to each go back, and they fit in categories. And the biggest one are crew go backs, and that means they left something at the job site, or they forgot to do something, or they broke something. There are sales go backs where, let's say the client said they wanted 3 feet of clearance to the building, and the salesperson wrote 12 inches of clearance to the building. And the crew did what's on the work order, and now the client is complaining. The crew didn't do anything wrong. The client showed up and saw that we didn't do what we said we were going to do. And now the salesperson has to go back and resolve that, either do the pruning themselves, write another work order, explain to the client why we didn't do it that way, or whatever. But we put that all out on the table just so that everyone knows. You might feel like everything's going really good or really bad, and showing the numbers helps them to get a really big, a really strong picture of what is actually happening, rather than just relying on the feel. This bar chart right here, all that is showing our end of the year presentation. We show people, we remind them of what the annual revenue was every single year since the beginning of the company, which started at $27,000 in our first year. And I should say my first year, because I was the only one that worked for the company at that point, to now over a couple $1 million in revenue. So that's a scary thought to some people. I've had conversations with business owners that don't believe that their employees could handle that amount of information. And indeed, there are some employees that cannot. There are some people that see $3,000 on the work order and don't believe that it's fair that they get $27 an hour, and you multiply that out. If I work a 10-hour day, that's $270. There's 3 of us here. That's $540 or 600 and no, 7, whatever, $700. Wait, so the crew only gets 700 and the boss gets 2,000? And some people aren't willing to listen to where the rest of the money is going. I don't have any of those people working at my company. I think that if I handed somebody at my company a pen and paper and said, write down where you think most of the money goes, I think that if we looked at it, it would be a pretty spot on representation of where the money actually is going. Then we have to think about the actual doing of the work. And this is 3 pictures of 3 people that have been here for varying amounts of time. Tyler's the guy in the orange helmet. He's been here for going on 6 years now. That was him when he'd been here for about 6 weeks. And he kept screwing up his notches on that little pine he was felling. And so we were just like, do it again, do it again, do it again. And Hector, the guy on the right, that was his first crane job at this company. And we found the perfect removal for him. It was a redwood tree where there wasn't a lot of lateral climbing. And we felt like that was a great way to help him get into doing the process of removing a tree with the crane in a more simplified way. And then Mike is one of our newest employees, the guy in the middle. he's mostly on the ground right now, but his goal is to become a climber. And Mexican fan palms are a perfect job to put aspiring climbers, because A, they can be really tall, so it will help us to know how scared of heights they are. And what needs to be done is really straightforward. So it can be challenging to put a new climber into a big giant tree with complicated specifications, but it's easy to put them in a Mexican fan palm and tell them to take out all the dead branches, dead fronds and downward hanging fronds. And obviously advise them on the safety concerns with having a rope going over right where you're cutting. But in each of these instances, these were not the best people to do that task at that job site. That picture of Tyler, I took that picture. I wasn't on the crew anymore, but I was there doing the walkthrough, and it was comical and painful to watch him do what he was doing. And if we were strictly focused on productivity, I should have walked over there myself, took the chainsaw out of his hand and did it myself, because he probably spent 5 minutes doing something that should take 30 seconds, and the same with Mike. He was on a job with 4 other climbers, which means there were 4 other people that could have done that Mexican fan palm faster than he could. And when Hector did his first crane job, we sent him with another very experienced crane, what we call a crane climber, someone who's able to do crane removals. So at each one of those instances, I lost money that day, but we were investing into these people. Look at the smile on Hector's face when that photo is being taken. I think you can see through Tyler's visor a big giant grin, because he was, he knew it was comical what was happening. And I think he also knew that this should be so easy. Why is it not happening? They're having fun while they're doing it, but they're developing skills that become important and make them better assets on my crew. And Hector, I don't think it's even been 6 months since we removed that redwood tree, and he's already done several. We don't do a lot of crane removals here at our company, but Hector's already done several of them, and he's getting really good at that. And we only have a few people that can do that level of removal, and if 2 of them have a day off, Hector might become the person that has to do it. So I'd rather have him have as much experience under his belt as possible. That could also be a 1-hour presentation, just this one slide right here. So how does it work? Who's actually running the show? My first bullet point, it's really tradition. We know that when we get there, there's a pattern that has to happen. And obviously we have to get from the shop, we have to load up the equipment and get to the job site. Excuse me. So that's the beginning of the pattern. There's people at the shop that are looking at Jobber and matching up the tasks that we are doing that day to what needs to get loaded on the truck. If your company only does tree removals, you can probably skip that part because you have all the rigging equipment and everything on the truck ready to go. So we spend a lot of time here taking equipment off the truck from yesterday's job and moving new equipment onto the truck for today's job. Then when the crew gets to the job site, they know that that pattern is someone has to, if the client is home, someone has to talk with the client. We've got to sterilize the pruning tools if we're doing pruning that day. We've got to get the equipment out, the cones out. We've got to start protecting, putting plywood over windows and moving. Everybody in LA has tons of potted plants, so we have to move all these potted plants. And those are things that no one is telling the guys who to do that. They might forget, and then someone says, hey, can you move that? Because they're already clipped in and ready to go up the tree. And then they notice that there's a potted plant behind a fern over there, and it wouldn't make sense for them to unclip everything when there's a ground guy standing right there. So then when we start assigning the tasks, it's not really an assignment. It's almost like the DIBS protocol. And I think everybody understands the DIBS protocol. We're keeping in mind that the goal isn't for me to get to do the tree that I want to do today. That's like a micro personal goal. But the bigger picture is that we want to be constantly improving the company. So if Mike is getting good at Mexican fan palms and he's the only person that ever does them, when we have to divide the crew, whoever starts doing them is going to be slow for a while until they get good at it. So if we have 8 people that are really good at doing Mexican fan palms, it gives a lot of variability. So the crew knows that. And if they're looking at a job where, here's an aspiring new climber, this is a good place for them to learn, and the job seems to be bid strong. We're looking at the clock here. We've got time. All right, new guy, go grab your stuff. We're going to put you in this tree, and let them invest that company time, slow down the job a little bit to improve the company because they understand that bigger picture. And then the one that I highlighted in orange, you have to factor in the preferences. And if somebody is really good at Mexican fan palms and they hate doing them, it's going to slow them down eventually. It will either slow them down while they're doing the palm, or it's going to slow them down over time. Like they just feel like, ugh, why am I even here constantly doing the thing that I don't want to be doing? So we do want to cater to the preferences of what each individual crew member has, to an extent. If somebody has too many preferences and is always trying to do one limited narrow range of things, then we have to expand their mind a little bit sometimes. So I talked about this a little bit. The work order, which was the quote, just converted, instead of saying quote, it now says work order. That is what dictates what action items are happening to the trees at the job site. And so what we do has to be crystal clear. And that means that the salesperson has to have possibly a significant conversation with the client on what the expectation is going to be. And then we're selecting from all the possible specs that we could apply to a particular tree. We're selecting the best ones that will be as good as possible for the tree, make the company money, make the client happy, and something that the crew, when they show up to do it, it will make sense to them why this is what we're doing. I do want our crew to understand why we do what we do, and oftentimes we'll put that in the work order. You might see a tree that looks perfectly safe and perfectly fine, and the work order says to thin it out, and you don't understand why you're thinning the tree out. But if it says to increase light into the windows on the south side of the house because the client is a photographer and they want more natural light coming into their studio, all of a sudden it makes perfect sense why we're taking that action on the line on that tree. So then that means the foreman is the salesperson, right? That's how it would work, right? Because the salesperson is the one that's writing the work order, and the work order is what dictates what's happening. So that kind of makes the salesperson the foreman. And the answer is like kind of, but not really. Because if you think of all the roles of the foreman that we talked about at the very beginning, making sure you got your safety glasses on, and deciding the order of what happens, and deciding who is going into each tree, talking to the client, and all that. The salesperson isn't doing any of that. all they're telling the crew is, when you show up, here's what I want you to do to the tree. I had said before that I sometimes make mistakes, and when I say that out loud, I find it hard to believe myself. Let me take a seat here. But it is true, and it does happen sometime. So when a mistake is made and something isn't clear in a work order, it could be as simple as not putting to remove a 6-inch diameter dead branch over a playground. And the crew gets on site, and they're there to do the hedge. We all love hedges, right? And so they start doing the hedge. They get up on the ladder and to level off the top, and then, hey, any of you notice that big giant? Why aren't we cut? Is that on the work order? We're taking that out, right? And they don't see it on the work order. And then that's where I might get a phone call, and it may turn out that you can't see it from the ground, and they saw it because they were up on the ladder. But what if they encounter that situation and I'm not even there? This might be an opportunity to talk to the client and say, hey, we found this thing while we were up in the tree, and we don't notice it on the work order. Did you and Nick talk about that? And they might say, yeah, we did. And actually, I want to leave that there. We don't use that playground anymore. We're actually going to have it taken out. But that's where I always hang my bird feeder. But I took it down right now because you guys were here and I didn't want the bird feeder to get damaged. And then it all makes sense. But they might say, no, Nick didn't mention anything about that. What do we do? Is that dangerous? And then the crew can tell them, yeah, we'll handle it. No charge, or we might have to charge you $250. Or if it's a really big thing, maybe they want to talk to the salesperson to see. But it's very rare for our crew to ask me how much they should charge if a charge needs to be applied. So the on-site arborist, and this is part of why we have so many certified arborists at our little company here. We want to schedule our jobs so that every single job, if there is pruning happening, root pruning, any treatments on a tree, anything other than just removal, if any of that's happening, there is a certified arborist on site, and that's the person who's going to be looked to make the judgment call if they encounter a crack up in a tree or anything like that. Kale, we good on questions? Do I keep going? Awesome. Okay, it's just coconut water, by the way. Don't worry, everyone. So this is at least at my company, something that I find comical because I speak to clients very naturally. I'm good at it. I know that's a strength that I have. From a very young age, I would go door to door. I had a lawn mowing company, and so from middle school, I shoveled snow to make money in the wintertime in Wisconsin, and never had a problem with it. A lot of my crew hates it with a passion, and they will do everything in their power to never, ever, ever have to talk to the crew. This isn't, oh, whoops, sorry, let me go back. This isn't a policy, and it isn't something that we specify how it has to happen, but somebody's got to talk to the client. So it may be as simple as whoever gets to the job site first, they see the car in the driveway and they know we got to get that car moved and we want to get this program rolling. So they go knock on the door and say, hey, Mrs. Johnson, I'm Pedro from TreeCareLA. Can you move the car? And that person might become the foreman for the day in the client's eyes. We want to make sure everyone that we hire has the ability to communicate clearly with the client. I don't expect everyone to know all the client's answers. That's impossible. I don't know all the client's answers. But I do expect if the client asks the newest employee, they just started yesterday, a question that is somewhat technical and they don't know the answer to it, hold on one second, let me go grab one of the other guys, they'll be able to help you out. So they should be able to, they're answering the question, but not in the way that the client liked, but they're going to get that answer for them. We have to have consistent messaging, and that comes mostly from the work order. If the client says, hey, while you're here, I also want you to do this thing to this tree over here, and then the first person they talk to wants to be a people pleaser and says, yeah, no problem, we'll get it done, but that's not on the work order. The office doesn't know anything about it. The salesperson doesn't know anything about it. It's going to create confusion, because at the end of the day, it probably isn't going to get done, and then the client's going to complain. So the crew has to have an understanding that they say, well, let me look. I don't actually see that tree on the work order. We can do it. We have a lot to do today. We might not get to it today, but let me have, I'll have the office call you to set it up if we can't do it today. And then they know to take that piece of information and get it to the office and say, hey, this lady looks like $1,000 worth of work. Should we quote it? I think we can get it done today. And they'll add it on for that day or schedule it as another job to happen in the near future if it can't happen today. So we have to have that consistent messaging. Someone has to close out with the client at the end. Clients feel, I don't know the right phrase for it, but they feel almost let down if you send the crew out there, you say hi in the morning, get the lady to move the car, you chat with them at lunch, you finish up the job perfectly, do every line item perfectly, put all the potted plants exactly where they were, oriented the way they were, and then get in the car and leave. We have had clients call us and complain that they didn't let me know they left. And sometimes it's a legitimate complaint, like, I was waiting to go pick up my daughter from soccer practice, and I thought there were still people here, so I had to get one of my friends to go get them. And had I known you left an hour ago, I would have gone by myself. That makes sense. But sometimes it's like an emotional, like we let them down. And so I'm always getting on my guys at the end, go knock on the door and let them know every little thing. And it makes the clients feel really good when you close out the job at the end. And then maybe this is a thing that's specific for our crew, but take turns. And I've heard it where they'll be like, no, I talked to the dude yesterday. He was annoying, so it's your turn. You got to go talk to him. So if you don't have people that are the natural client communication specialist, I think is a good way to put it, then you're going to have to rotate through. And it's important to know that talking to the client, the clients all understand the concept of a foreman, and they expect the concept of a foreman. And so when you are the one that knocks on that door, they're going to treat you like the foreman. And it's totally fine to act like the foreman in the eyes of the client, and then still run the crew the way that the crew is naturally going to be run, regardless of who's talking to the client. So what happens when something happens, something bad happens, something gets broken, a limb falls and breaks a potted plant, for example. We have a protocol at our company, and it's not written down anywhere. It's not a policy. It's just people know that that this is what needs to happen. First of all, communicate quickly to the client and to the office, and then figure out how to fix it and get it handled. If it's a broken pot, a broken potted plant, maybe they're just telling the client, and the client will go, oh, I don't even like that thing. Just throw it away. Awesome, handled. Oh my God, I love that plant. Can you put it in that spare pot that I have over there? Awesome, it's handled. Oh my God, that was a really nice pot. I don't have one. What do I do? no problem, we'll get it taken care of. And then someone gets in the truck and goes and buys it, gets it handled. No matter what the repair is, if it's a broken window, a broken irrigation, we've got to get it handled, and it can't get brushed to the side because it's going to blow up later and become a huge issue. And the crew knows that. They've seen how we've handled it in the past. We jump on it when it gets broken, and this is an opportunity to turn an annoying, like, great, now look what we have to deal with, into a 5-star online review, because clients eat it up when you break something, make them aware of it right away, and then get it fixed lightning fast. I wonder if you could find a sacrificial potted plant at every property and just throw a limb on it and be like, hey, we actually have a pot right here. You want us to do it? Don't worry about it. We'll get it fixed. I wonder if that would actually give a company really good online reviews, just because I've seen that happen time and time again. But the important thing is that the crew collectively knows that that's what has to happen, and they are acting on it quickly. Like, all right, I'll go tell the client, call Francis, who works in our office. Call Francis and let her know that we need to find a window repair person. And that process happens really, really quick. Okay, so what if things go really wrong? So if we, and I don't mean like something crazy on the job site, but let's talk about disciplinary stuff. And disciplinary stuff on the crew could be someone not pulling their fair share of the work, somebody that is bickering with the crew, maybe. Sometimes we hire people and they don't fit well in the No-Foreman world, and maybe they come from a more militaristic background, and they focus on the negative parts of what happens here, and we can see them almost trying to exploit that, and that they're not fitting into it. The important thing is that stuff happens all the time on every single crew, and it happens here too. And most of it I never experience. I never see it. The crew is handling it on site, person to person, and there's sort of an escalating level of how this gets handled. The people on my crew have a good working relationship and good, like, just general communication skills, and they'll call them out in a comical, like, loud way, like, oh, look who's late again, and just throw it out there, like, we all know, we all see it, don't act like you skipped in under the radar and nobody noticed. And they'll call them out on it in a lighthearted manner, and that's their way of I think some people might say that this is the very definition of I'm drawing a blank on the word, passive aggressive. Thank you. That's passive aggressive. Like, why don't you talk to them and tell them exactly what's going on? But when you do things in a light way, it can be a way to politely say to someone unofficially, we see what you're doing. We know that you're doing it, and we want you to know that we think it's wrong, and we know that you know that already. It's like you're saying all of that by just saying, look who's late again. So, and then when things get a little more like it's continuing on, I'll see them assigning duties as punishments. Most of the guys on our crew would rather not be driving the chipper truck. They like to drive their own cars so that they can go straight home from the job site. They'll get home faster that way. So they're typically rotating. They should be rotating who's driving, so it's not always falling on one person. And then I'll see them say like, no, dude, you got to drive today because blah, blah, blah. That they'll cite what they're basically saying is, as a punishment for non-satisfactory performance at work, we're going to make you do these increased duties to make up for what you've done in the past. And that could be like being the ground guy on a job when this could have been a job that you were climbing on, or something like that. But that's all happening by the crew, by themselves. And then every once in a while, when things get a little more serious, someone's going to pull them aside and say, hey, nobody likes how you talk to them. It isn't enjoyable and it's not necessary. We can do the things that you're trying to ask to get done without you saying it like that. And I've pulled up on job sites when that conversation was being had as a small group at lunch, and it's like a little heated, and I'm just like walking in to see how the job's going, and I put my hand on the gate and I hear it, and then I just go, you know what? I think I'm just going to walk away right now, because they're handling business the way I want them to, and my stepping into it is going to change the dynamic that I don't want to change. And then by that point, if that doesn't handle it, then that's when the other crew will come to me and say, hey, we're noticing this, this, and that. And we've tried these specific things to fix it. And we want it to be fixed. And we think that you as the boss have to do it. And sometimes it's the crew telling me, and sometimes it's me seeing it. Usually it's guided by the crew, but occasionally it's just me observing something that isn't fixing itself. And so it starts with a verbal, like, hey, dude, stop doing this particular thing. And then if that doesn't fix it, then we have to make it official, put it in writing. This is a formal warning, a disciplinary warning for these specific things. We need you to sign off on it so you understand that you have officially been told. And I think they understand that the writing is on the walls, that if they keep doing that thing, termination at the company is possible. And that'll oftentimes be in writing that they're signing off on, that they're understanding that this could lead to their firing. And if that message isn't received and an improvement isn't seen, then we have to let them go. Some people are let go very quickly and it doesn't go through all these steps. The longer you've been here, the more grace we will give you. And the firing at the end usually doesn't come as a surprise, but sometimes it does. All right, just a few more slides here. All right, so you're on board, makes sense. You're open to trying it. You think your crew might be able to handle it. What do you got to do to actually get it done? Start training your crew. And I mean, training them in two different ways. One of them is like, here's how to make a proper 3-step cut, and how to actually do the work, but also training them to understand what your goal is and how the crew is managed. And this is sort of like you're doing it under the radar. You're not doing a PowerPoint presentation. All right, guys, this week, here's what we're going to try. Bob's not the foreman anymore. From now on, everybody can do whatever they want. Imagine the chaos if you did that. Start giving tasks that aren't necessarily the things that that person would normally do, but things that you're willing to sacrifice the time into. Maybe send 2 people out to do a small job that they've never worked without the typical foreman over their shoulders, but send them and say, I know you guys can do this. Just go there, knock on the door, and don't say, you specific person, I want you to knock on the door. Just say, I want you guys to go there, knock on the door, and let them figure it out. And they might have to do rock, paper, scissors at the beginning to decide who gets to knock on the door. And then maybe don't follow up, just see if anything happens. Or maybe ask them like, hey, did everything go okay? Client say anything at the end? Oh, we didn't know we were supposed to talk to them at the end. Don't yell at them. They didn't know, they've never done that before. And then say, oh, okay, all right, that's fine. If I send you again, make sure you talk to them at the very end. And then the next time you send those two people out, remind them, hey, remember last time you didn't knock on that one person's door? Make sure at the very end that you knock on their door. Train the people, try it, and then talk with them about it. When you have a really strong, effective foreman, there does not need to be any talking amongst the crew at all. The foreman can assign the tasks very quickly by pointing. You go do that tree. I can't tell you how many trees I've been pointed to, and the specs are, which means round it over, or which means thin it out, lion's tail it. Like that's what, I've worked at companies where that's how they described it all. You're gonna have to talk more, but this would be your opportunity to like get good at the talking on a smaller scale, to make sure everyone is able to kind of get good at this part of it, I think is the right way to put it. Rotate people through. This is a guy that, super cool dude, nice guy, really strong guy, and you would look at him and go, oh my God, the ideal ground guy. He can lift a lot of stuff. And we knew that he needs to be up in the tree. And so we put him in there, and look how much fun he's having up there, right? Like that's what it's all about. So make sure that you're rotating people through. And I think I have one slide that's in the wrong spot here. Oh no, yeah, that is basically it. So there's my information. I don't think that you guys would need to call my office, but the number's right there if you want. But here's another thing I want to share with you guys. Those are the Instagrams of everybody on our crew. And if you want, go follow them. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. Tag them and stuff. And you can ask them what this picture is all about right here. So that basically sums it up. This is something that, to close it, I grew up in a very military family. I had my mom was in the Marines for 13 years. My dad was a retired Marine, and my stepdad was in the Marines for several years. And they ran a tight ship in the house, and I saw the pros and cons. And eventually I realized that high-ranking military officials, like moms and dads, don't like to be talked back to. And I love to talk back to everybody. So I knew that when I started my company, I could feel that we were transitioning away from having a foreman, and I was 100% cool with it. So that wraps it up. I would love to answer a lot of questions, so hit me with them right now, and we'll get them one by one.
Okay. All right. Well, starting with Ryan Delcourt's question earlier about requiring Class A licenses, places that require that being difficult. He said that Class A or B commercial driver's licenses are required for bucket trucks and large lifts, and a lot of times these people get designated as foremen.
Yes.
Do you have a way of working around that?
Absolutely. Driving a truck good doesn't mean you have the ability to be a foreman. So there's no reason why that designation means that you are the one that is best suited to direct the job. It means that you can drive a big truck, and that's really important. Scheduling wise, it may mean that you have to go to all the hardest jobs because the equipment that you have is used for those specific jobs. But it doesn't mean that it's bad if you're the driver and you're the foreman, but I would not see that in any way as an impediment to the flat hierarchy model. and it's basically like you could say, well, having a top climber is going to be hard because they're the one that is usually the foreman. So it's just, I think it's a different mindset, and you can definitely pull up in your big giant truck and not know what tree needs to be done first. And then the crew says, oh yeah. We're I got a couple people working on that in the back. Can you put this one right here? And in the same token, if that's not a foreman telling you, put that bucket truck right there, you might say, yeah, but it'll be a lot easier if I put it over here because I think we can hit both trees at the same time. So it all fits in. I think they would fit perfectly regardless.
Another one here. Actually, most of these kind of boil down to asking about the relationship between new hires, people who have been around longer, and how training works as well. Who's in charge of training? Who's in charge of um, that sort of system?
Yeah. Okay, good. And you know what? You brought that up before, and I didn't go into detail about who is in charge of that, and of the actual training themselves. The trainings are come up with in two different ways at our company. One of them is what I would call top down, and that would be me or Karina seeing an opportunity that we should take everybody, like to Treetopia, for example, or observing that there's a particular skill that needs to be improved upon in the company. And so we'll put together a training, and it's either me doing the training or we'll assign one of the guys on the crew, or it'll be bottom up where people on the crew are saying, hey, right at this moment, we have a lot of people on the crew or few people that don't have good chainsaw experience. Maybe that's a good example. Can we do like a 2-hour training on that? And then I'll say, great, can you do it? And then we'll have them do it themselves. So there isn't a training director that is in charge of putting together 2-hour monthly training on a variety of topics, plus a more extended quarterly training and blah, blah, blah. But I'm very confident that even with this loosey-goose model that we have at our company, that we are doing as much as or more than the average training that companies are doing across the country.
Okay, and how does on the pay side, how are you judging people on an individual basis on their employment?
Yeah, I think the idea is to just pay them as little as possible without them leaving. So that's not just kidding. Well, like anywhere else, there's a base pay that you start at. And if you're coming into our company with like basically, minimal experience in the industry, you're going to start at a lower amount. And if you've been in the industry for a long time, you're going to get started higher. I can't think of anyone. Every single year we're giving raises. We try to do our reviews every single, like every year on, like clockwork. They don't always happen that way. We have, let's take the entry level ground guy position, someone who's, maybe familiar with the industry, has done, by Angela, has done some work a little bit on the side or whatever. We'll pay them an hourly wage, and then we'll give them what we call the ground guy checklist. And the ground guy checklist is 2 lists, one of which, when you complete it, you will, it's about 15 tasks. It's basic things like knowing how to put out the cones, knowing how to tie on a chainsaw to send it up to the climbers, knowing how to help one of our applicators in doing trunk injections. You don't need to know how to do trunk injections, but knowing how to help them effectively. I could probably pull it up and read it to you guys, but once you can do all those 15 things, we just give you another $1 an hour right there. Some people do that in 2 weeks. You know, they hop on YouTube and learn how to tie a cow hitch so they can tie on a porter wrap the right way. And, you know, you can learn that overnight, right? And some people take 6 months to do that. So you start wherever you start. Some people, we start them and we realize we started them at the wrong rate. Like, oh, dude, sorry, you're super mega awesome, and we honestly didn't expect that. So I know we started you here, but it's been 6 weeks, and we're going to put you right here, and then they're going to progress upward at that point. And I've worked at companies where everyone has a specific job title, like you're either ground crew apprentice, ground crew, or lead ground crew, and then climber apprentice, climber 1 and climber 2, and everyone that was a climber 1 was making the exact same amount, and we got raises collectively. And it's effectively the same thing that's happening here, but it's with a little bit of not randomness, but kind of like customizability per person built into it.
So the next question I have is a mixture of a couple here. I've got someone asking about implementing this in a very small crew, about 3 to 5 people. And then someone, Ashton Phillips, asking Sean Murphy asking about how big you think the company can get using this system.
That's a heavy question.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start with the little one. A small crew, that is so perfect. That's exactly the best way to do it, because you don't have to make any major changes. If you've got 50 employees, this is going to take a year or 2 or 3 or more to really get there. But with a small crew, you can do that in a few months. And I would do it in a variety of ways. If, let's say, you hired me and said, like, all right, Nick, you're our consultant and we want you to manage our 4-person company, I would say, all right, starting today, every time you pull up to a job site, you're not the typical foreman person. Whenever the crew says anything, you respond with, I don't know, what do you think? And it's going to sound like you're giving them attitude, but genuinely find out, what do you think? And it's going to go slow at first, because you're asking people questions they might not have ever thought about. Pretty soon you're going to see it happen. Like the switch will get flipped, that they know the question's coming. So instead of saying, hey, what tree should I do first? They're going to say, hey, can I start on a magnolia first? And those are 2 totally different questions. And as an employer, I don't ever want the what should I do now question. I want you to take it a step further and hit me with, should I do this first? Because that shows me, I mean, maybe you just randomly picked one and said, all right, we'll start with this one. But it makes me think that you were thinking about it at least. And I might say, we've got to save that one to the end, because all the kids are going to school and that tree overhangs the sidewalk on the other side of this hedge. So let's hold off on that one. But then at least that conversation is happening. So now, all the way on the other end, how big can the company get? I don't believe there's a limit. There's a limit if you give up on the model. But when I started out with one human being doing $27,000 in a year, and in fairness, my first year was only 6 months, so just barely getting by. I never would have thought that I had the ability to create a company that could do $2 million, $2.5 million, whatever we're up to now. And it happened. And there was a moment where we had like 5 people on the crew, and I realized, wow, we don't have a foreman. This is so cool. Like, this is our thing now. We're going to do this. And at that point, we were only at like $250,000 a year in revenue. And now we're 10 times bigger than that. And so I think that if I gave this presentation when we were doing $250,000 in revenue, a lot of people would say, well, that's cute for $250,000 in revenue, but you can't do that at a tenfold scale. And I would argue that the difference between $250,000 a year and 2.5 is a tenfold increase, and it's worked all the way up to here. And the difference between tenfolding from here is 25 million a year. And I know we can do that. And the reason I know that is because we are already, I don't want to say too much here, but we're already meeting with people on our team to talk about how to increase the reach of what we do at our company. And, there's a limitation at our shop right here. There's a limitation to how many vehicles we can fit in here, how many phones we can plug into the wall, and how much electricity we can pull out of our panel. So this is limited, but that doesn't mean that our company is limited. So I know through our client, Carl, who I spoke about earlier, he was talking about companies that are doing billions of dollars in revenue each year, and they're running with the flat hierarchy model or versions of a flat hierarchy model. So there's no limit. It's really up to you. It's what can you do with it.
Right. I think this might be might have to be one of our last ones here.
Yeah.
Asking what the most stressful aspect of running your company is at your current size and how it compares to the earlier days when you weren't operating in this way.
The most stressful part is the natural desire for everyone to be perfect and managing that within my own self. And what I mean by that is, if you think of me when let me give a different example real quick. My dad used to be, when I worked at his company, he used to have this amazing skill where he would walk onto a recently damaged property, a house that had water flooding into it, and he'd go, "Oh my God, this is a $35,000 job." And I'm like, "You don't know that. It takes 3 hours to write up the quote." And then he'd go write up the quote, and sure enough, it would come up to $34,792. And I'm like, "Oh my God, my dad is amazing." And what I learned over time is that because he had said that, he wrote the quote so that it would be what he said, because he already told the adjuster, "This looks like it's going to be $35,000. And then he would write the quote to match what he had told them. So it wasn't that he was good at predicting how big this job was going to be. And so the same sort of thing happens when you're a small business owner. If you're the only operator or it's you and one person, everything you do is perfect because you're like, "Well, I'm the one that sold the job. I'm the one that trimmed the branch. I'm the one that talked to the client. And the time I left was the exact perfect time I should have left." But the truth is, maybe you weren't very efficient and you could have gotten 2 jobs done in that day and made $700 instead of just $350, but we just look at it like it's perfect. So now we're at a point where I have 2 other salespeople. Jobs are happening that I don't know who sold it. I don't know who the client is. I don't know what the work was. I don't know how much it was. I don't know what the complaints were, if there were any. I don't know anything about it. And sometimes I see things and I know it could have been done better, but I have to remind myself that what we're doing right here is amazing. And that as much as I want every single aspect to be perfect, I know that it doesn't have to be perfect, because even if me as a kind of an overbearing boss that wants everything to be perfect, I have really high expectations, and maybe we're only operating at 75% of what I want, we're still doing way better than we need to. And we're blowing the market out of the water as far as what gets done. That's Colin right there. Everyone can say hi to Colin. So if there's any final, is that the final question, Kale? Okay. Okay. If people do have more questions, I do this every time after we do webinars. My Instagram at TreeCareLA blows up. I get a lot of follow-up questions, and I think there are people that are too shy to put it in the live chat. So message me on Instagram, and I will respond to every single one of them. Bye, Colin. Treetopia is a really cool event that we took our whole entire company last year. Tree Stuff hosted it in collaboration with A Plus in the Bay Area of California. And it was something that we had observed that there's arborist conferences a lot. And I think that a lot of arborist conferences are focused too much on academic parts of trees and not enough on the day-to-day activities that our employees are carrying out. And I was kind of like struggling with this in my head a little bit. And then Treetopia got announced, and all the presenters were practicing arborists that were talking about how to hold the chainsaw in your hand while you're actually making the cut, how to run your rigging line when you're working a particular type of tree. And it was stuff that I went, oh my God, this is amazing, because I can send someone to a presentation to learn about how the bark beetle devastation in Colorado might be similar to what may happen here in the future. And that'll be good knowledge for them to know. But oh my God, if they see a technique that they can put into the field the very next week, that benefits me as a company. So we shut down for a couple of days. We sent the whole company up there, and everybody had a blast. It was a lot of fun. And all the presenters were amazing. And I say that because I was one of them. And I just recently heard confirmed that it is happening again this year for the second time. And I'll have to leave it to Kale for details when it's happening, where it's happening, and all that kind of stuff. But rest assured that I will be there. Absolutely. Well, I'm sure we will. Awesome. Thank you, guys.